a special guest that I am so excited to talk to, a leader, a transformational leader that has transformed schools. But before we get into that, I want to get straight into my intro. If America talk, what would it say? This episode and most of our episodes that we've been doing have been on coaching. And we are speaking with not only a coach, not only a consultant, but we are speaking with Charles Williams, an experienced school leader, a consultant, and he is his own host of Narrative podcast. Charles has spent two nearly 2 decades leading, teaching, and advocating for equity and mental well-being in education. Today, we will explore the power of authentic leadership. And this episode is going to be titled Leading from the Inside Out because we want to lead from the inside out. It always starts with us. And if you know a little bit about my journey, I am also a leader. So I'm going to be listening in just like you guys to see what tips and tricks that I can learn from Charles because he's an expert in this industry and has been doing this for so long. So, Charles, if you would like to introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about you.
Yep, I love that introduction. I appreciate it. And in fact,
Yes.
I have a keynote coming up in June, and I've titled it "The Inside Job" because that's what we're talking about, like
Oh,
doing that internal work first. So I was like, does she know? Is she going to be there? Like, so thank you so much. Yeah, as you mentioned, I've been doing this work for almost 20 years. Next year will be year 20, and I have served in almost every capacity. I've gone from teacher all the way up to principal. I'm back down to an assistant principal by choice, so that way I can continue to do this work, as you mentioned, consulting and coaching and speaking all across the country, whether it's at conferences or working with organizations. It's just a passion of mine, and I believe that. I used to, and I tell people this all the time. I used to have this like statue of the guy chiseling himself out of stone, right? That self-made man. And I used to pride myself on that. But as I got older, right, some of that hubris, some of that humility, like some of the hubris fell off, the humility grew in, and I realized, I didn't get here by myself. I am
right.
standing on the shoulders of giants because lots of individuals helped me to get here. And so now I'm trying to do the exact same thing and help to foster the next generation of leaders because we need that work. So yeah, I'm just out here doing all the things that I possibly can because I don't know how much time I'm going to have. So I want to make the biggest possible impact that I can with the time that's given to me.
And I love that. I talk to a lot of leaders and they build that their biggest thing is I want to build the next future leaders. But sometimes when building the next future leader, you kind of may, slip on your own leadership because you're like, I'm trying to build this leader. So what are some things that you do to stay grounded in your leadership because you are manning a ship of of almost hundreds of people at a school, and that's similar to like a warehouse manufacturer manager, in a way, because it's so many different mindsets, personalities. How do you stay grounded in that kind of atmosphere?
Yeah, I think there's a few things, right? The first piece is that it really bothers me when people say that leadership is lonely. I was like, well, it's only lonely if you're doing it wrong. Like,
Right.
there are tons of us out there. And so
Right.
I spend a lot of time, not necessarily in the same space, but I connect with my fellow leaders. I have so many individuals that I can pick up a phone, right? And I could have a conversation with them on my way home. I could shoot them a quick message, whether it's through social media or through text. Like I stay grounded in that area of just consistently connecting. And that gives me an opportunity to run things through, whether to say, hey, this is something I'm considering. What do you think about this? This is something I'm experiencing. How would you approach this? And so really being able to continue to keep myself grounded and networked with leaders from all across this country has been phenomenal. And then not to say the other piece of doing that same work with the people that I'm leading. I
Mhm.
know that at the end of the day, like my success is only possible if they are successful. And so
Right.
I strive to create an environment, a relationship where if I am failing, if I'm struggling in something with that, we could have very honest conversations. And it's not necessarily a call out, but a call in. And for them to be able to say, hey, Williams, like, you missed the mark here, or hey, we've noticed this, how can we support you? And so it's not just necessarily with that network of fellow leaders, it's with my people as well, because again, at the end of the day, I'm only going to be as successful as they are. So I need to make sure that they have the tools, the resources, whatever it is that they need to be successful, but also having that relationship where we could just be really honest with one another.
And I love that approach because when I spoke to you last time, it seemed to me that you were an empathy leader. You led with empathy, and that's so important because I work at a small business, but I work in the small business department, and we do government contracts. And so I work with multiple entities. And a lot of the times what I see is people that feel like they can be their self when they're at work, they do a better job. When you lead with empathy, they feel like I'm comfortable here and I'm comfortable giving my all and my best. When you don't feel like, when you're walking down the hall or you're walking, down the office, and people don't feel like obligated to say hi or feel obligated to have a fake smile or feel obligated to do anything. That's when they do it freely. They do it with, they do it with the love that they feel like they're getting from the company, from the organization. They feel like these people care about me, and I know I can go to my leader and I can be myself, and I don't have to be put in a box.
Mhm.
So I even see that with different companies that I like to shop with. A lot of people like to go to Target because their leaders seem like they care more. They seem like they're more empathetic. So you get better customer service. You can find someone, you can talk to them, versus having that, being in a situation where you might go to a Walmart and you can't find nobody, and everybody's tired and everybody's overworked and everybody feels like they're underpaid, and they might be getting paid the same amount at Target, but that empathy and the leadership that they have and the structure of how they speak with their employees, it matters so much because it's empowering them. And that leads me to talk about your unique situation, because you're not in a public school, not that I recall. So that gives you a little bit more range than the your average public school principal. So what what does it look like for you to empower your employees or your teachers that are under you?
Yeah, so I spent a while at a charter school,
Mhm.
so that there was some autonomy there. And now, technically, I'm at a district public school, but we're
Okay.
considered an independent school, which means
Oh.
that many of so in Chicago and CPS,
Mhm.
we are broken into networks because we're massive, right? We service over
Mhm.
350,000 students. And so
Wow.
we are broken into networks, and then each network has a chief who oversees their schools. We don't have that. We're able to operate independently because we've demonstrated a track record of success. And so when you're able to move in that space, right, you're able to not worry as much about all the red tape and all
Mhm.
the political pieces that are in that space. And so I think what it allows us to do is to really be able to have conversations with our staff and figure out, like, well, what is it that you need, right? And then we can
Mhm.
make those decisions. So for example, we have a PD day coming up. Well, we
Mhm.
don't have to follow what the rest of the network is doing. We're like, hey, we're going to do what makes sense for us, what makes sense for our teachers, right? And so we can cater and we could really deliver personalized approaches for our staff or the people within our building. And I think a lot of times, even leaders who are in spaces where where you may not perceive that you have that autonomy, right? You have to find ways of saying, how am I going to give my people what they need, right? And I'm doing this whole workshop right now. It's called like Leading from the Middle. It's based off that book, but it's that idea of how do I make sure that the people that are in my charge are taken care of, but I'm also appeasing those who are making the calls, right? And
Mhm.
finding that space in the middle. And it is challenging.
Mhm.
Oftentimes it's stressful, but if you are creative enough, if you are focused enough and say this is something I truly believe in, that you're going to find those ways. And so for us, like I said, we've got this PD day coming up, so we're really tailoring that to the needs of our staff. We can, I used to do some really exciting activities at my charter space. One year we did this like whole pirate theme, and so we did like an escape room.
Oh.
It was a pirate themed escape room, and that's when we were reading the pirate books through Dave Burgess, which I've gone from reading his books and doing those things with my staff to now being one of his speakers and authors. So that's an
Oh,
incredible honor.
wow.
But like it's you, you just have to find ways, right? And I think so often we put ourselves in boxes and people complain about it. Well, I'm stuck here and I can't do this and I can't do that. But like
Mhm.
more often than not, when you step back, you're like, you created those own parameters, right? You took the advice or suggestions, whatever you got, and you built that box for yourself. So if you built it, you also have the capacity of tearing it down. And so that would be a challenge I have for anybody watching this. Like find ways to meet both of those, but focus on your people and the things that they need, and it will pay off in dividends.
And I think that speaks to culture, company culture, and being intentional about making your employees feel valued. And when it comes to that, I want to just touch on a little bit for people that are not in the school space like myself, and they have no idea what it looks like for the day in the life of a assistant principal. So, can you kind of walk me through a little bit, or even somebody that thinks they want to be in leadership and they just think all you do is complain all day and tell them what to do, and they have no idea? Tell me what that looks like for assistant principal.
Yeah, so I joke because my students just they call me AP. I was like, my name has been dwindled down to two letters, but I jokingly say that AP stands for all positions, but
Mm,
it's only partially joking because you don't ever have a traditional day, right? And so as I think about it, right, oftentimes my wife says, "So like, what do you have to go on today?" I was like, "Everything." Like I'm walking in ready to do everything, and so I think for me on a typical day, right? I start the day off by being at that entrance when my kids are walking in, my kids and my staff. So
oh
I
wow.
am one of the very first faces that they see when they walk through that door. And so I'm standing there, I'm greeting them, telling them good morning. And not only am I wanting their very first encounter and experience when they walk into the school to be a positive one, right? It also allows me to gauge where they're at, right? Because if
Mhm,
people are walking in and they're right, today was Friday, like they're walking in and they're skipping and they're happy
mhm,
and they're excited, and it's like, all right, cool, I'm judging the energy. But if I see that kid walking in and they're frustrated, right, now you're on my radar. Hey,
mhm,
what's going on? Is everything okay? Do you need anything? Like, did something happen at home? Was it in the car? Was something here from yesterday? And you're walking back into it. Like, where are we at? And it gives us an opportunity to be proactive and to get ahead of things before they might fester throughout the day and blow up into something else. So
mhm.
it's a great way to begin the day. So I'm usually down there. It's 8 o'clock is actually my cutoff time, and then I go and I do what I call my rounds. So I
Okay.
walk through the building and I stop at every single classroom. So I check in, right? I'm checking in on the teacher, making sure that they're good. Is there anything you need? I know the day's just getting started. Did you forget copies? Do you need coffee? Like,
Mhm,
is everything okay, right? So I'm doing my
mhm.
rounds, but I'm also checking on the kids again, just doing a pulse check. But also, every once in a while, there's a teacher that may have called off, and we're like, "Wait, we didn't get a sub for that room," right? So
Okay.
you're also doing just checks to make sure, like, is everything where it's supposed to be, right? And
Right.
so you do that round, and then from there, it's a multitude of things, right? Whether it's popping from meetings to meetings with our district. So today we had a meeting with our CEO. It might be doing conferences and evaluations. So right now it's that time of year. So churning out evaluations, checking with teachers, doing post
Mhm,
observations, watching the teachers do their thing. So spending a lot of time in classrooms through that aspect. Or just being a listening ear. I had a student walk in today and just like, I need to speak to you. I need to get this all out, and just sat in my office spilling everything out. Right. And then of course I'm like, is this I need you to hear or I need you to do? Right. What kind of
mhm,
conversation is this?
mhm,
Right. And so it's really throughout the day, it's just spending time and connecting with all of my staff and all of my students, whether it's observing, whether it's in a meeting, whether it's just they love my office. And I don't just mean the students. Like my staff come in and sometimes they
Oh
just
my
sit in my
god.
office and work. And I'm just like, all right, like
Okay.
that's fine. But I have water and snacks, and my conference table is in there. So I've really set it up really nice. So I mean, people just spend time in there. And while some might see that as, well, that's intrusive and that's annoying, and why are they
Mhm.
in your space? Like, it tells me that they're comfortable, right? That it
Yeah.
is a safe space, and they know that, we don't even need to have a conversation. You just feel comfortable being in that space. And so, you know, that is throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, like I said, at the very first face they see, I'm one of the very last ones they see as they're walking out. as I'm standing out there and greeting all of my staff, all of my students, good night. I'll see you tomorrow. Be safe, right? And it's unfortunate just where we're located. I feel compelled to say that, right? Like, please be safe. I need to see you tomorrow,
Mhm.
right? Because so many things have happened in our neighborhoods. We've experienced so many losses, right? And so I want to make sure that one of the last things they hear when they're leaving that building for the day is like, I care about you. I cannot wait to see you tomorrow, right? And then I wrap up. Now I'm there super early, so shortly
Mhm.
after the kids, I'm out. I
You're
know
out of there.
some I
You're
know
out of
some
there.
people stick around. I'm like, listen, I was here at 6:30 this morning. I am
Right.
not sticking around.
You're out of here. So that's a I know I asked you this question in our pre-meeting, but that I want to kind of tie into what you're saying because you are in an environment that can be a little bit risky.
Yeah.
But anything can happen in any environment, honestly. But you are in this environment and you are dealing with a lot of young boys, I'm sure as well. And one thing that I notice within the therapy sector is it's not a lot of men that are becoming therapists,
Mm,
and it's not a lot of men that can connect with other therapists because there's nobody that looks like them or understand their situation or have a understanding for that. So the next best thing when you're growing up is to have that male teacher or to have that male principal. And I want you to kind of talk to the perspective of a young boy that may see you and may think your job is just like you're just having a great time, you're just chilling out. You're always in a classroom. You're always, just sitting around laughing. But because people don't see the work behind it. And that's why I wanted you to mention, what are you doing? Because people don't understand that you're trying to raise up communities year over year
yeah,
as
yeah.
far as the entirety. You're not just dealing with the students, you're also dealing with the parents. So now you got double the trouble. But my question to you is, what would you say to that little boy that's watching you now and that's in school and that says, you know what, I want to be a principal and I want to be an assistant principal one day or AP? What would you tell that young boy?
It's interesting because there are a lot of those people that I talk about who just sit in my office. A lot of
Hmm.
times they are my young men.
Mm.
They have this perception that I am secretly wealthy. I really have no idea why, but they're just like, we know. And I was like, I wish I was living the life that you guys have created for me. But we sit and we have very honest conversations. And one of the things I tell my staff and my students, like, you can ask me, like, I'm going to be honest with you. And so we have very honest conversations. And so one of the things that they learned was that I became a father in high school. And they're
Hmm.
just like, wait, what? Like, you became, yeah. Like, my dad wasn't around. I had a, single mom who worked multiple jobs. I raised my little brother. I'm sharing these stories and they're just like, wait, your life sounds like our life. And I was like,
Hmm.
yeah. Like that, because we did have very similar lives and yet here I am. Right. And so we have these just very, very honest conversations. And I think a lot of times, right, through social media or through other spaces, there are these false narratives, right? Like, about like just what things can be or how people have gotten to where they are. And I'm like, I was literally in your space. I was in your shoes. And here I am today. And I'm like, it wasn't easy. I'm not going to lie to you and say, like, I woke up and I landed here. Like, it was a grind. I tell them about how I went to school 2 days a week, all day long. And I worked the other five because I was a single father because I got married and divorced and I had two kids. And Mirror, I wasn't even 21 at the time. Like,
Wow.
so they're just like, wait, like, you've done it. Like, yes, it's possible. But, we talk about what you need to do that, right? The mindset, the grit, the determination in order to get there. And really blocking out all of the noise and the buzz that's around you. Because there's a lot of those temptations for quick wins. Right.
Hmm.
And I tell them, like, I get it again, because I've been in
Hmm.
those spaces, and those quick wins are also quick losses. Like, it is not where you want to establish yourself. And we have and it's been powerful over the years to see the transformation of some of them, right? Just coming in and saying, hey, listen, I'm doing this now, or I'm working on this now, or hey, can you help me with this? And it's no longer, you know the grind, the hustle outside. It's, hey, I'm looking at school, or I'm finding a scholarship, or for those going into the workplace, right? got some people into this like plumber program, and so it's been really influential. Just to be honest, like there was no program, right? There was no like, okay, we're carving out 20 minutes a day at the beginning of the day for the like.
Mhm.
It was just authentic, genuine, organic conversations. And there would be times because I had this little like love seat and two chairs, and the
Mhm.
boys are just all chilling in there drinking the waters out of my fridge, and I was like, aren't you all supposed to be in class? They're like, this is learning, like we're with you. and,
Mm.
and I was like, okay, all right, that's fine, I'll give your teachers passes later on. But it's finding those windows and those opportunities, right? And so for me, I never wanted to be an educator. I never thought I'd be in a position where I'm at a six-figure position. Like, these were not things that were in existence growing up. Nobody in my family had careers, everybody had jobs, right?
Mhm.
We lived paycheck to paycheck. It was the reality. But my grandparents believed in me, right? They instilled those things in me. So I was fortunate enough to have that and to have this bigger dream, right? And so, and that's what I tell the students. Maybe you're not going to have somebody to instill that in you, but you can't consistently look outside. Like, sometimes you have to know the thing that you want and believe in yourself and say, I'm going to do this. It's not necessarily for this person or for that person, but I'm going to do it for me. Because at the end of the day, when you go to sleep at night, everybody else is worried about themselves. Like,
Mhm.
you are the one left with you. So can you go to bed each and every single night saying, listen, I did my very best with the things that I have today? And if you can say yes to that, sleep easy. But if you said, I took the shortcuts, I didn't do this, or I made excuses, like, at the end of the day, the only person that you have to face is yourself.
That's so powerful because I believe that when we talk about self reliance, self reflection, reflecting on who you are is so powerful because um the speaker Simon, I can't remember his last name right now, but he said something that I really resonated with me, that everybody has the ability to be a parent, but that doesn't mean everybody will be.
Hmm.
And I believe that that correlates with being a leader. Everybody has the ability to be a leader, but that doesn't mean everybody will be.
Right.
And what that looks like is the responsibility that you must have for yourself to be able to be responsible for others. And I think that you learn that lesson at a very young age because you had to be responsible for others. You had to take that role. And I want you to tell a little bit about your story about you even getting into college and like what that was like, what that was like, for you.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, there's a when you were saying that, there's a quote by August Wilson. Love August Wilson, but he says, like, you got to be right with yourself before you can be right with anyone else, right?
Right.
And so,
Right.
um, for me, so it was interesting because, like I mentioned about my grandparents. So my grandparents never finished school, but they understood the power of education. So school was never like a discussion. It was an expectation. So
Mm,
growing up, I used to tell people all the time, like, I was phenomenal at school. And I was really, again, that hubris, right? I mean, I graduated at the top of my class. I was like number three. I had a 4.3 GPA, right? Honors, I mean, all the things. That was me. But I realized later on, the only reason I was so great at school was because school was built for people like me. Right?
mm,
I could read something, I would have it. It was locked away forever. I could listen to something, locked away. Came time for the test, I could access all of that. I could regurgitate everything. Like, I was built for school. School was built for me. So of course I'm going to succeed in that space.
right.
Right. And so everybody else who was struggling, it wasn't that they were any less smart or any less skilled. It was that they were trying to operate in a space that was not built for them, which played a large part into how I approached education as a teacher later on. So when it came time for college, I mean, I was going to go to Ball State originally, and they were throwing everything at me: the honors package, the computer package. Like, I wasn't paying for school, I mean, the whole 9 yards. And I remembered I was accepted early on. It was like February, and I went off.
Wow.
I was like, cool. I'm set. Like, we're not
Right.
even through with the we're not even into the fourth quarter, and I already know where I'm going. Everything's
Yeah.
set. Like I'm on easy street now. And whenever you feel like you've got it all worked out, like God has other plans, right? So I remember sitting in the car with my girlfriend at the time, telling her about it, and she's like, "Yeah, that's cool. So I'm pregnant."
Oh
I
my
was like,
gosh.
"Wait, what?" And I was like that. I heard that audible record halt, like, like I was just like, maybe that's not what you said, right? I remember she said it again, and we both grew up in a space where we didn't really come from anything, and so
Mhm.
she understood what was standing in front of me. And I remember
Mhm.
she told me right then and there, she's like, "Listen, you don't have to do this. I'll be fine. I'll take care of this.
Mm.
Like escape, get out of here,
Mhm.
go do the
Mm.
thing." Well, uh, I didn't have a dad growing up. And
Mhm.
so like there was a part of me that's like, no way, I can't do to my child what I had. But there was that other part of me that's like, this is your chance. Like, why are you saying
Right.
right? And so I would love to tell people like, no, I knew right away that I was going to stay and be a great father. Like that wasn't the case. And my daughter was born in July. She wasn't due until September, and she
Oh
was
my
born in
god.
July. And I remember it changed everything for me. Like I remember seeing her laying there crying. I kind of like reached in, and I remember I will never forget this. She reached up, grabbed my finger. She stopped crying, but I started. I'm not a crier. And I was just like, there's no way I could leave this precious little thing. And so
Wow.
I went to school here, but even then there was this reservation. When I signed up, I was like, listen, I'm only going to be here for a semester, so don't be
Mhm.
giving me all these other classes. And my advisor was like, okay. And then I came back for the second semester, and I was like, listen, it was only this 1 year, like, because I'm leaving after this.
Right.
She's like, okay. So then 3 years later, when I graduated from there, it was an interesting experience because I didn't have the full college experience, right? I wasn't
Mhm.
off, I wasn't in a dorm, I wasn't partying, I wasn't doing all the things. I literally, as I mentioned earlier, I went to school 2 days a week and worked the other five. But every single day I had that purpose, right? Every single day I was tired and irritated or exhausted, whatever it was. My babies are there,
Right.
right? There were times I took my babies to class with me, right? I was sitting in
Wow.
college class with my babies, and it
Right.
was like this, but we're going to do this thing. Like we are not going, like you are not going to be in this position when you're my age. And right, one is 21 right now. She's off at culinary school in New York.
Oh
The other
wow.
one is 22. She's down in Atlanta at studying fashion at SCAD. Like they're doing the things,
Yeah.
right? Like, and so we are breaking those cycles. But,
Yeah.
you know, maybe it wasn't, maybe I won't have everything that I ever wanted, but I'm setting them up, right? And it's going to set
Mhm.
my grandkids and my great grandkids. And so sometimes we have to be okay with being the cycle breaker. We may not get all of those things that we see on TV and social media and all that stuff. Like, it may
Mhm.
not be for us, but know that we are setting it up for future generations, and they will be appreciative later on down the road because you've broken off and now you've set your family on a whole nother trajectory. And it's for me, it's wild to see that, to see like we are living a vastly different life
Yeah.
than what I grew up with.
And I think that just goes to show that you are a born leader because you had to be the staple to lead yourself and to fight for yourself, to be the example for what you didn't see and what you wanted your children to see. So you were leading. And my mom always says this. She said, you must lead a household before you can lead a business,
Yeah.
because you are leading everything that happens in your house. You have to lead it. You have to know how to run a household because it's very similar to anything you're going to lead.
Hmm.
You're going to have facility management, you're going to have people to manage, you're going to have personalities to manage, you're going to have culinary to manage. It's going to be similar wherever you go. People need to eat, breathe, and they need to have a good time wherever you go. So I think it just speaks so much to not only how you were able to lead yourself, because like you said, you didn't have any examples. And I think that that's the hardest when you're like trying to find the answers and you're just trying to figure it out, and then you're able to give the answers to someone else. And that's what a true leader is. They go before the pack. to
Mm.
figure to to survey the land so that they know where where everybody else should be positioned. And that goes to similar to the school system as well. You need to survey the land to know, okay, you need to be here, you need to be in janitorial services, what have you, like to position everyone. So when I think about what you were saying, it made me think school is made for you. And you mentioned school is made for you, and I'm like, okay, but what about the average C player in the game? And school is not, they learn by sitting in your office and learning from experience, learning from the way you talk. You have a very rich spirit. You have a very well-spoken vernacular. So now I just want to sit here and learn from you. I don't really want to go to school. Or I'm not really that good at test taking or X, Y, and Z. What about those type of students? Or just students that are dealing with a similar life path to you that you can talk to them about.
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, like understanding that there are multiple pathways, right? You may have a goal, and there's not just one pathway. And I have this conversation, with my oldest daughter all the time because oftentimes she's like, "Dad, I got to do this in order to get here," and I'm like, "Sweetheart,
Hmm.
there's so many different ways. Like if you want to be a designer, like you don't have to go to school in Atlanta. There's
Hmm.
all sorts of opportunities, right? And so I think one, first of all, understanding that there are multiple opportunities and pathways. So maybe going to a big university is not the pathway that's intended for you to get you to where you want to be. And not to listen again to all the noise for everybody else telling you what they think you should do, but you need to understand what it is for you. Like those are ideas, those are suggestions, there are options, but knowing what best fits for you. Is it going to a 2 year school and getting that associates and then working through? I mean, there are so many different programs now that, weren't in existence. Like when we were like,
Right.
you know, I saw the other day you can get an MBA by literally building a business. And I was like, where was this? Like, like I'm not
Right.
sitting in a classroom, I'm
Right.
doing the actual work and I walk away with an MBA. Like that is powerful. And so
Hmm.
I think for students to figure out, well, recognizing that there isn't always one pathway and exploring the various options that are out there. But I think at the end of the day, like I was just having a conversation with a student who was just struggling. They're in a home, they're not happy there. And I'm like, but you have to figure out what it is that you want and then ground yourself in that. I
Hmm.
said, because if you do not know who you are, you don't know your values, you don't know where your goal is, then every opportunity, every suggestion is going to sway you, and you're going to spend all that time kind of floating around in the breeze instead of moving forward with that wind in your sails, right? And so it doesn't matter if you're a C student, if you're an A student, figure out your path, the path that makes sense to you, and then grind away at that. Right. At the end of the day, if somebody's like, man, I need a college degree, you know what? And I hate to say it this way, especially as an educator, but the truth is, D's get degrees, right? Like at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like people are looking for that sheet of paper because more
Right.
often than not, and I could speak to this truth, I have never asked, like, so what were your grades like in college? Like,
Right.
I want to know, can you do the job? Can you show up each and every single day? Can you teach? Can you deliver these powerful lessons? Do you understand? Like, I'm not wondering, did you pass that class? Because you're
Right.
going to demonstrate that to me through the work that you're doing. And so I think students need to recognize, like, they're oftentimes trying to fit this particular model that doesn't always necessarily exist.
Hello.
This is my
Hi.
grandson. Say hi.
Hi.
Hey, buddy, I'll be right with you, okay?
So I definitely I believe that we all have different faiths, and that's what I really wanted to get to, because from the student to the teacher, they're thinking, if I do this, if I, if I'm seen enough, if I'm heard enough, if I get enough A's, that I'm going to get to that next level. And then sometimes they're disappointed and let down when they do everything that they thought they were supposed to do and they don't get the outcome they want. And it leaves them in this place feeling like, I don't know if anything is worth it anymore. I don't know if school is worth it. I don't know if this job is worth it because I'm not being seen. I'm not being valued.
Hmm.
And I can say that just across the board, like when people are so rigid that they're not allowing to have a fate meet them where they are. And I want to know your perspective on I want you to speak to the perspective on speaking to a teacher that may be feeling like she is not or he is not getting the validation and they're doing everything right. Why is it that they can't grow or glow or what have you, or get the outcome that they expect? What have you seen over your last 20 years of working in the education industry? Oh, you went on mute.
So you're
Okay.
right. So I think a lot of times people feel like I'm not meeting this metric, this thing that has been created for them. And so personally, like I despise our teacher evaluation systems because I don't think that they truly fit or truly capture what teachers are doing, the real
Mm,
work that they're doing.
mhm.
And so I think as a school leader, we have to be very cognizant about how are we building relationships, because we're very quick to talk about the power of relationships, and we often mean between teachers and students. But are
Right.
we doing the very same thing with those that we're leading? Because
Mhm.
if you're not getting to know the person, if you're not getting to know the people, then you're absolutely right. If I'm not meeting those very specific metrics, then I may not be seen at all. But
Mhm.
there's so much more to me as a person. One of my staff members, she's going to get her master's in educational leadership, and she was just
Okay.
having that conversation, and or she was asking me about that, and I explained to her, at least this is what I do.
Mhm.
Right towards the beginning of the year, I oftentimes have my staff create almost like a T chart. Right now,
Okay.
one side, I want you to write down what are all the things that make you you, right? You're adventurous, you love cooking, I don't know, like who are you as an individual?
Right.
And on the other side, I want you to write down all the things that make, your profession, those professional expectations, right? I got to be punctual, I got to do. So when we have really difficult conversations, because sometimes it's going to happen, we split that. I'm not talking about who you are as a person. I'm talking about your practice, right? Because then we have that hard conversation. We curate that, we fix that, but I'm still going to celebrate and love on and right recognize all of those things that make you feel seen as a person. And I think that as school leaders or just leaders in general, we have to remember that our people are not just our employees. They are humans. They are
Right.
people. And
Right.
that we need to see both of those pieces. I'm the type of person that they don't always feel the same way back. But if I
Mhm.
sit there and I have a very difficult conversation with you because you cannot show up on time, right? And we explore that, and I'm like, listen, you're getting written up for this. I will
Mhm.
see you the next morning. I'm like, hey, good morning. I'm glad that you're here. And you might be
Right.
like, wait, what? Like you just wrote me up. Like, yeah, I wrote you up.
Mhm.
But that doesn't make me dislike you as a person, right?
Right.
I still need you to be seen as a human. And so I think as a leader, there's a lot of work that we can do. But I think as individuals, if we find ourselves in those spaces, one, I would say have a conversation, right? Have that conversation with whoever it is and just say, listen, I'm not being seen. I don't feel valued. I don't feel heard. And have at least have the conversation. I'm hoping that whoever your leader is, it may have just been a lapse of judgment. Like I said at the beginning of this conversation, I open it up for my staff to have those conversations with me. So have that conversation with your leader. But the truth is, at the end of the day, if they're just kind of like, that's not why we're here, like, and if that is what you need as a person, because not everybody always need, but if that is what you need, then maybe it's time to find some place that fits what it is that you need. I think so oftentimes, like we all have core values and beliefs,
Right.
and we consistently find ourselves, or we can find ourselves working in places where those values are in contrast with one another. And when you operate in that space, like you're going to be burnt out, you're going to be frustrated, you're not going to feel whole, and you are, like we talked about earlier at this conversation, you are not going to be able to perform in the way that you should be performing. And so have the conversation, and if it's not that, like find someplace else, find that leader, because they do exist. Find
Yeah.
that leader who's going to be able to do that for you.
And that brings me to, I think, last time we spoke and we were in a pre-meeting, you're like, sometimes it's people that are trying to conform to, groups, and I encourage them, leave, come work for me. So it's like I understand it, it's kind of like it's just laws, and it's principalities that are at place when you're in leadership. You gotta follow the rules just like they do. They're late, write them up. They're great. Talk to them about what can you do to make them better or help them to grow in whatever capacity that they wish. But my question is around the this is just a curveball. So I want to talk
It's
about
okay.
the
I love
econ.
baseball. It's fine.
Yes, yes, like literally curveball. I just thought about this because I feel like you're very intentional and you're very creative as a leader. And in this economy right now, everything is shaky with finances. And I want to know if in an ideal world, what is something you can encourage your teams, or your if you had if you ran a district, something that you can encourage your district to do to help what is that low income teachers or teachers that are just getting started, that they're making the base minimum, and they're just barely getting by. What is some things that you can either encourage them to do, like actual action items, or what you would want to see in the real world?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's unfortunate, that so many of our teachers, they rely on like the lists, right? I don't know how many times I'm on social media and I see all the lists. There's
What
the
exactly is that?
so they'll be like, hey, here's my Amazon list. Can you help me clear the list? So they're literally saying these are the
Oh,
supplies I need,
okay,
and
okay.
like they're asking the world, like,
To
hey, can you
help them.
yeah, can you please help me
Okay.
clear the list? And so if you're ever on social media and you see something like clear the list, that's what teachers are doing. They're like, we
Oh.
need these supplies. And so there's all these different platforms. There's things like Donors Choose. There's a few others that they're which is kind of a sad state when you're just like, hey, educators, like we're gonna create platforms for you. And people celebrate it, but it's like maybe we should be a little more cognizant with funding on a whole different
Mhm,
level from from decisions. But I think if I was going to for the educator, I think part of it is one, being creative, right? Figuring out how do we, if needed, being share those supplies. But I think again, I keep coming back to this idea of like social media,
mm,
because there are all these like the classrooms of Instagram and the classroom, and so teachers are like, whoa, look at that classroom, like I want to set that up, I want this,
mhm,
I want to recreate that.
mhm,
And first it's like, is that really what you need? Is that who you are as a person, right?
mhm.
And just because that classroom looks great, it doesn't mean that their student outcomes are going to be are
Right.
necessarily any better, right? And so I think a lot of times there is this constant need to being like competent, like the keeping up with the Joneses sort of thing, right? Like, because that's what I'm seeing all over on social media. So I'm trying to do all these things. So I think first of all, from teachers, if you're struggling in that area, like take it slow. Like you get a very small tax credit to buy those things, right? If you're
Mhm.
lucky, your district gives you a little bit of money. So be very, very intentional and focus on what is it that you truly need and what do your students need, right? And getting creative in those spaces. I think as school leaders, I think one of the things that we need to do is that we need to be very cognizant about how we are developing our budgets. I sat in that space. And I
Mhm.
will say this, and Mira, I'm sure there are going to be people who argue with me because, yes, budgets have been, it feels like every year budgets shrink. So
Yeah.
I don't be like, well, budgets shrank this year. Yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
They've been shrinking for the last 20 years. But when people say, well, there's no money for it, I say there's money for what's important, right?
Mhm.
And so when somebody tells me, well, my school doesn't have money for that, oftentimes I'm like, is it that they don't have money for it, or they're not prioritizing it? Because I'm not just speaking, just you know blowing smoke. Like I've been in that seat, and I made sure that I prioritize the resources for my staff and my students. I my school that I was at, we were tiny, so we didn't have a ton of money coming
Money.
in.
Yeah.
Like we had to give a ton of money back to the district because we were like,
Wow.
we were a charter space. So we didn't have a very large budget, especially compared to some of the other schools. But guess what? I built an entire resource room for my staff. Like
Wow.
they can go in and they can pull like I was very, very intentional. We bought these kits so students would have supplies. So I say that, yes, right, there are economic and money issues, but school leaders, oftentimes have the final say on what their budget for their school looks like. And so you
Mhm.
put money where you think it matters the most. Because I've seen schools, right? I've seen school leaders who spend a ton of things like on marketing, right? We're going to buy
Mhm.
all these fun shirts. We're going to do all
Right,
these like,
right,
and it's just like, oh, that's great. Everybody has a shirt for every single holiday.
right,
But like our books are 4 years old.
right.
Like,
But it looks nice
so,
on social media.
but it looks great. It
Yeah,
looks great, right? And
yeah.
so those are things that I think even going beyond, I would encourage individuals, like, if you do, as I mentioned, like, if you know of an educator, oftentimes, yeah, like if you see that clear the lists, maybe get them a pack of markers. I don't know, whatever's on that
Mhm.
thing, but just recognizing that often what the students have in our spaces, it's because we have provided it.
Mm.
And so, like, you're fussing like, oh, it's not. I remember growing up, like, we had our school list. We came to school with all of our
Right, right.
supplies. Oftentimes that's not the
Not
case
the case
anymore.
anymore.
Like, if the kid needs a pencil, it's because we are giving it. If they need a notebook, I'm literally just supplied one of my classrooms with hundreds of notebooks because we have like 170 freshmen, because they needed to do this journaling activity. Like,
So are you assistant principal for high school?
so now I am, yeah. I was a principal at an
Oh,
elementary school for
okay.
almost a decade, but I am now at a high school, so I've been there for the last 3 years.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. I gotta get you on again because I did not know for a high school because there's so many different dynamics
So
with
many.
the generations now, and then the generational gaps between between the students and the teachers, and it's just so many different dynamics that take place that I don't think a lot of people that are not in the school system know about, and they don't really have the idea of what you guys are experiencing in that capacity. I want to know, now that I know you're in a high school, I know I'm out in Georgia, and I know my company actually advocated and sponsored for it's this school, but they have a program called the 3DE program. And the 3DE program, are you familiar with it?
No, no.
It is a program for children, well, high schoolers that want to become entrepreneurs.
Okay.
They want to become entrepreneurs, and they have the ability from freshman year, they sign up for the class, to senior year, where they learn everything you need to know to become an entrepreneur. And senior year, they actually create the business. Once they create the business, they have a marketplace where they could sell cookies, cakes, t-shirts, hats, and they can make their own money within the school. And now they have that to put on their resume, saying that I was the XYZ of this company, and it's funded. It's like a certain fund, so that it's an actual company, and they have all the paperwork that they need to actually say that this was a real company I worked at and I was the marketing manager and we made this much money. So when they go, because the problem is I work in staffing, you come to me straight out of high school, you don't have no experience.
Right.
You never did nothing, you don't know anything, and I can't give you a job because nobody's going to really hire you. And if it is, it's moving boxes, and sometimes they could barely do that because they don't know how to do nothing. So the program helps the kids that are less fortunate also to be able to take that money and put it back into their pocket, or help out with the house, because it's open to the public for like 2 days. So during lunchtime you can come there, you can get snacks, you can get t-shirts, and this is all stuff that they're making. And they have creative rooms within the school. So it's like one creative room where they have like the Cricut, so you can make your t-shirts, you can make your hats. And basically they have to raise their own funds. So like they have companies like my company, they have Delta, just different companies that we have out here, to come to the classroom and coach them to say, okay, you need $100 to get this started. Everybody put in $25. Everybody put in $20, and let's see how we can get this started. This is what you're going to invest in. This is all the things that you need, and then we come back next year, and then you see they got the stuff they need now. Then so it's really building upon all of the skills you need to know. So by the fourth year, they're launching their business, but they've done so much market research, so much analyzing. They're investing their own money into it that it actually becomes something. And these sometimes they even go on to really continue this business with their friends. So I don't know if you guys have something like that out in Chicago?
So, I'm sure something like that exists. There are so many different programs. We don't have exactly that program, but one of the
Mhm.
things that we do in our building right now, we have something called glitter nails.
Oh,
Um, so they come out, they literally they teach the students how to do nails, and so by the
oh,
time the program is done, they are certified, right? And they could do nails, and it's the same thing. Like, all right, well, if you're
oh.
going to half the time they're they're trying to do styling in school, we're like, yo,
Mhm.
pay attention and focus. Well, at the end of the day, like, well, I'm trying to make some money, I'm trying to help out my family, I'm trying to
Right.
whatever, right? So it's like,
Right.
all right, instead of fighting it, like, what if we created space, right? And this is what we've done, like, during
Mhm.
lunch, all right, well, go ahead and set up your little shop, do your thing, right? And so it's
I
not saying
love
you
that.
can't do it, but there's a time and a place, right? Let's
Yes.
create some structures around that. You want to set up shop after school? Awesome. Here's a time and a space to do that, right? And
Yeah.
so now, instead of, right, because if you need money, kids are going to find ways to make money, and
Right.
oftentimes it's not always the right way.
Right.
But if I can give you a way to make money to keep you out away from doing those other things to make that money, and you're doing something that you're passionate about, right? And hopefully maybe at some point, like we said, you're going to build that into your own business. And so
Right.
there are tons and tons of opportunities. I know in Chicago there are all sorts of programs, but that's just one of those that we have at our building.
And I love that. One thing I've been when I first went to Chicago, I just want to say it's nothing like they portray it on the news. Chicago is one of the most beautiful cities
Yeah.
I've ever been to, and you guys just have so many sights to see out there that I was so surprised. Like everything that I could picture, it was 10 times better. And I really, really enjoyed it. And the people are really nice out there. I wasn't expecting that. I did go in the summer, so it wasn't cold. It was good vibes. It was warm. It was just beautiful. And I just wanted to say that for anybody who hasn't visited Chicago, it's one of the beautifulest cities I've
Yeah.
been to. And it just has so much to offer. Like I didn't have a car. We stayed downtown and we
Mm.
just walked around the city, and it was just oh, and we did a boat ride. Like I'm like boat ride. I don't see people doing this stuff. What is
Were
going
you on
on?
the river or were you on the lake?
On the river.
On the
On the
river. Yeah,
river.
the
Yeah.
architecture tours.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like this is so beautiful. So I want to encourage y'all to go out to Chicago because it's such a beautiful place to be. But before we go, I definitely want to just ask you some rapid fire questions. I
Sure,
have a
sure.
game called Mirror, Tell Me More, and these questions you're just gonna just answer them straight off the first thing that comes to your mind. And the first question is, if you can swap reflections with someone, who would it be?
Oh, like my physical, like I would see somebody else.
Yes.
Oh, I'm gonna go with the Rock since my grandson says I already kind of
What?
like.
Okay, okay. And when you looked in the mirror today, what did you tell yourself? Or what did you see when you looked in the mirror today?
Yeah, I'm not a big guy for the whole affirmation piece, but it's that constant reminder. Today's a beautiful day here in Chicago. It's 70 degrees,
Oh
right?
wow.
Short day on Fridays for us, and so it's just like, listen, like today's going to be fantastic. Like we're going to get through today, and then we're going to have some fun. So I get to do this with you. I got my grandson coming and hanging out. Lots of weekends for the plans for the weekend. So it's always just looking like today. You never know what it's going to have, but the rest of
Right.
the day is going to be fantastic.
I love that. It's a beautiful day to be on earth today, I tell you. But my last question is if you can give yourself advice from 5 years ago, what would that advice be?
Yeah, it's the same advice I can continue to give myself today. Like keep doing it. Like you do not know the impact that you're going to have. In fact, my good friend Vernon Wright says it is our responsibility to do this work. When you have something, it is your responsibility to share because you have no idea the impact that it's going to have. And just the other day, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do this podcast anymore. It's a lot of work. And then literally that day, somebody emailed me. I was like, thank you so much for that episode, right? And so it
Oh,
was like
wow.
it's just that reminder, like no, like you have no idea the impact that you have. So keep going, keep doing the thing. and like it's, everything's going to work out. Everything has there's a plan, right? I may not know what it is, but it's going to manifest in its own way.
I needed that. I truly needed that because I'm new to the podcast game. If you're watching this, I'm new. But I'm like, is this even worth it? It's over 500,000 podcasters,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's so many more listeners. It's about a billion podcast listeners. And me myself, I listen to multiple podcasts. I'm listening to stuff all the time. I'm not just like one podcast girl. So I'm like, it takes time,
Hmm.
it takes development, and it really takes persistence. Anything that's worth it. I had a vision from God about this because I felt like I have been in the government space for a very long time, and at this point I'm just like, where the government's headed, I need to pivot. And I'm like, you know what? I had a vision about this, a seed. Like a small little seed, as it grows, it can grow you a garden that reaps a harvest.
Hmm.
And I know that might sound simple, but it's like what I'm doing right now is so small, and in the compounds of the world. It just seems like it's a little tiny dot. And then I saw that little tiny dot, what it can grow. And I'm like, maybe stay the course just a little longer to see, just a little longer. So, like you said, like just continue, keep going, because it's not about, sometimes you have to start with changing one to change the world.
Right.
So, it's all about just keep going. And if anyone is thinking about giving up, your future self is going to be so proud of you that you continued to go, and they're going to say, I'm so happy that you didn't give up, because you're becoming exactly who you need to be. So before I let you go, Charles, I would love you to tell people where they can find you, and please let them know what type of coaching and consulting you do, so that if they're looking for that service, they can definitely reach out to you.
Absolutely. So you can find me almost anywhere. I used to joke that, like my kids were like, "We're gonna Google you." I was like, "Go ahead, whatever." And now I'm like, "Well, now you're actually gonna find me." But across the socials, it's at underscore CW Consulting. Somebody has it without the underscore, and they don't use it, which is a little frustrating. But hey, it is what it is. So underscore CW Consulting. Website cwconsultingservice.com. The podcast, as you mentioned, the counter narrative podcast. And so, feel free to reach out and connect with me across all of those different spaces. And as you pointed out, like, this coaching and consulting work, a lot of it falls under the space of leadership, organizational leadership, sustainable leadership. I do a lot of equity work, diversity, equity, inclusion work. And I know those are like taboo words today, but like, hey, you know what, whatever. Like, this is the work that I truly believe in. This is like what I've built it on. And so I continue to do that work. And then there's a lot of growing spaces around like resilience and mental just kind of wellness. And so
Mhm.
if you need some guidance about how do I run an organization effectively and efficiently, tons and tons of resources. I would love to either, whether it's coming in and speaking, I do lots and lots of keynotes, or if you want some long-term coaching and some guidance through a project or through a situation that you're experiencing, feel free to reach out.
And all his links will be below. Just in case you didn't catch it, all his links will be below. And we will be, hold on one second. Let me see if I can. So all your links will be below. I want to thank you so much, Charles, for coming. I know all your students probably call you Mr. Williams, but they're like, "Is that him?" But I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much, Charles, for coming today and speaking and just telling us about your journey. And actually, Charles has a speaking engagement coming up, so I'm glad I was able to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
squeezed into your schedule. But I thank you for your time, and for my audience, I want to let you know, if no one's told you today, I love you. God loves you. Until next time, peace. All right, we're all done.